Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome back to Sunoikisis's Digital Classics Summer Semester 2021. So today we have our fourth session of Sunoikisis, and our session is the third session about epigraphy for this semester. You know that we had two previous sessions about epigraphy. The first one was on teaching epigraphy in a pandemic. Then last week we had another session about digital epigraphic corpora with the example of the inscriptions from Israel and Palestine. And today we have our third session about epigraphy, but in this case the session is about linguistic annotations of Greek and Latin inscriptions. And today our guest is Francesca Dell'Oro. Francesca was already a guest and a contributor of Sunoikis's Digital Classics last year. Francesca is assistant professor at the University of Neuchâtel. She is an expert of epigraphy, Greek and Latin epigraphy, and computational linguistics. And she has now a project, WOPOS, or World of Possibilities, for modality annotations. And as usual, you have the class outline in GitHub with a description of this session. And today we will go through, we will see annotations of inscriptions, and also we'll see the Libyan inscriptions of Sicily, then the project, the WOPOS, the World of Possibilities project, and you have the links in GitHub, and then we will see how to explore a linguistically annotated corpus. You also have readings in GitHub, and then Francesca will also spend some time to talk about the exercise that you find in GitHub again. But now, okay, Francesca Dell'Oro. So Francesca, welcome back to Sunoikisis, and thank you for contributing to this session today.
Thank you, Monica, for the presentation, and thank you also for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, it is already shared. So I'm going just to start with my presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So let's start. Today I'm going to speak about linguistic annotation of inscriptions. And let's start with a general question about what is linguistic annotation in general. Then I will focus on two projects, the tree bank of Euboean Greek inscriptions of Sicily, which is annotated through mainly through manual annotation in the platform Aretusa, that you already know. And my second focus would be the annotation of Latin inscriptions in the framework of the WOPOS project. As Monica already said, this is a project about modality. And in this project, we use the two types of annotation, manual and automatic. And then to conclude, I will share with you some ideas to explore a linguistically annotated corpus. And finally, we will do together an exercise in our WOPOS platform Inception. Okay, now I have two preliminary remarks. The first one is that linguistic annotation of ancient Greek and Latin inscriptions is developing right now. So it is really a timely subject. And the second point is that there is not yet a standard for the linguistic annotation of ancient Greek and Latin inscriptions. I am referring in particular to tree banking, but also more in general. It is really a field that is developing right now. What is linguistic annotation from a general point of view, independently from a specific language? I would say that there is a core linguistic annotation, and we find here the annotation of parts of speech, you already know what is. This is very useful if you want disambiguate. So, for example, you want to know the occurrences of can as a noun or of can as a verb in English. Then you will have lemmatization, which is particularly useful when you have a language with a rich morphology, and this is the case of the classical language. And then you have morphological analysis, and also the analysis of the syntactic relations. So in the case of classical language, this is mainly syntactic dependencies. This is the analysis that you usually find in a tree bank. And I would say that this is really the basis of a linguistic annotation. Then there are other levels of the analysis which can be annotated, but for some reasons they are not very frequently annotated. So, for example, there are not many projects annotating phonetics and phonology. So, for example, if you have an oral corpus, you can annotate how sounds are pronounced. So, if vowels are short, long, open, close, and so on. For ancient languages, you can annotate, for example, the spelling and then make some hypothesis about what this can mean for phonetics, phonology, and morphophonology. Another level of linguistic analysis, which is not very often annotated, is semantics. And so semantics is a very large field of study, so you can define it as the study of meaning. And in this level of analysis, you can find many aspects of language. For example, in our project, the Corpus project, we annotate modality. I will explain you what is modality in some minutes. So if you know Aretusa and the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree bank in the last version, you may be also familiar with the Smythe grammar layer. And you see that there you have, for example, to decide the contextual value of a case, for example. So in the case of a genitive, you can decide if it is a genitive of possession or if it is a genitive of separation, and this is a kind of semantic annotation. Or you can be interested, for example, in the category of animacy, if the participants which appear in the sentences you are analyzing are animated or not animated, if they are human or not human. And this can be a feature important in some languages. So, for example, if you think at Spanish, there is a difference if you are speaking about an inanimate object. So, for example, you can say, estoy esperando el coche, I'm waiting for the car. And there is a difference if you are speaking about a human being. You will say, estoy esperando a María. So, in this case, you use a prepositional object, and this is because Maria is a human, and so an animate entity. So it basically what you decide to annotate depends on the focus of your project, and of course you cannot annotate all levels of linguistic analysis, in particular with levels such as semantics or pragmatics, because there you will find very fine-grained distinctions, and it will be impossible to annotate all aspects of semantics in a project, or all aspects of pragmatics. Another subfield of linguistics, which is today annotated, is onomastics. And onomastics is of interest for many projects. And you surely know the annotation of named entities. And so onomastics is one of the subfields of linguistics, which are annotated commonly also in other projects that are not specifically linguistics. Now I would like to show you some already extant examples of linguistic annotation of ancient Greek and Latin inscriptions. One of these examples is the digital marmorparium, which offers a complete analysis and study of the Hellenistic inscription known as the marmorparium. And in this study, there is also a linguistic analysis. And this was a pioneering annotation. It is actually the first inscription to have been tree-banked. And so if you follow the link, you can see the annotation in Aretusa. And another project I would like to mention briefly is Classes, Corpus for Latin Sociolinguistic Studies on Epigraphic Texts. And this is a project whose focus is sociolinguistics, and the annotation is centered on spelling variants, which are used as clues for study phonetic, phonological, and morphophonological variation. And the annotation is done manually for lemma and spelling, and the user can search for a predefined set of linguistic phenomena. So once again, you can follow the link and explore this project. Now I would like to show you some examples from the tree bank of Euboean inscriptions from Sicily, which is not published, not yet. And I would like to remember that there are very good introductions to Aretusa on the Sunoikisis pages, and in the link you find one of next semester. So I started to think about the annotation of inscriptions some years ago, and as I'm working on the Euboean dialect, I wanted to start with Euboean inscriptions. And at that time, when I started to think about this possibility of annotating inscription, Giuseppe Celano was annotating the marmorparium for the digital marmorparium project. And so we started to think and to exchange about different issues related to the annotation of epigraphic text. And we wrote also a short paper. And in this paper, we present some preliminary results and some thoughts about annotating inscriptions. And one of our concerns at the beginning was, for example, should we remain as close as possible to the actual epigraphic text, or represent it in an interpreted and normalized version? Or another issue was how should all epigraphic peculiarities which do not have standard editorial representation, such as, for example, punctuation marks, be treated? And so the tree bank of Euboean inscriptions from Sicily seems ideal for a test case, because it contains just a few inscriptions, so it is not a large tree bank. And these inscriptions are, for the most part, short inscriptions. And when you are working with short inscriptions, you are more often, or it is more probable that you will be constrained to take into account the extra-linguistic context and to consider the presence of the ictic, elements, or even the absence, as the object is there, so you don't need to mention it. And another point in favor of this corpus of short inscription was that it allows us to deal with the problem at the time. So one of the first problem we dealt with was how to represent the text. So, for example, you have the use of the Greek local alphabet. So, for example, as these inscriptions are, I forgot to mention that these inscriptions are inscriptions from the archaic and the classical age. So, for most of them, you will find the non-common alphabet. And so you will find, for example, Omicron for omega, and also for the digraph Omicron Epsilon. And of course, you find also dialectal variants. So one of the small problems was, for example, with the ancient name of Messini, because the literary sources give it as Zancle, but in inscriptions and on coin legends, you will find Dancle, and so we had to add Dancle as in instances of the same lemma as the forms presenting Zancle. But maybe one of the more challenging issue was ellipsis, even though ellipsis is notoriously problematic also when you deal with literary texts. So, for example, I've mentioned that these inscriptions can be very short. So, for example, here you have just a genitive. And a way to proceed was to look for templates in other inscriptions. And so in this case, it was the case of speaking objects. So there are other inscriptions in which we find, for example, as in the following inscription, you can see here, Hekataio emi, I am of Hekataios, and then we can determine with some precision what is missing, so the verb emi, and so we can add it as an elliptical node in Aretusa, and so it will be always recognizable as an artificial element. And so we can annotate, this is the annotation of Hekataio emi, and this is the annotation of Heracleida. In this case, Amy. This is just the standard form, and with the elliptical node. And of course, this can become more complicated. For example, in the case of dedications, when the verb of the main verb of the dedication is missing, and when also other elements are missing. So, for example, Lazzarini, in her book about formulaic language, attests that there is a formula with nominative and nominative of the victorious people who made the dedication and genitive of the defeated. And then there are also variants of this formula with sometimes labontes and sometimes helontes. And so if you are annotating an inscription in which the participle is missing, you have to decide which verb, which of these two possibilities you have to choose. And it could be interesting in such cases to have a common thesaurus for elliptical notes, so that we can try to annotate in a way which is similar independently from the project. And so we can guarantee a maximum of interoperability between the projects. I'm skipping the presentation of the annotation, and I'm going directly to punctuation. So punctuation is another challenge when you want to annotate inscriptions, because it doesn't function as a punctuation as in literary texts. And actually, as far as I know, we are still in need of an in-depth study of punctuation. We can say that often punctuation is used for separate accentual and or prosodic units. So, for example, encritics and proclitics are not separated by punctuation from their main word. But of course, this is an issue that would need an in-depth study to understand if there is a criterion behind any kind of any type and any example of punctuation that we find in the inscriptions. So now let's see an example from the small corpus of Euboean inscription from Sicily. So here you have a very simple inscription. This is Tita Bo, so this is a feminine name. Then there are 3 dots, and then there is file with already with eta in this case. And and now the question is, how do you want to interpret it, and even whether it is legitimate to interpret it as it were punctuation. So this could be an interpretation. So Teta Bo, she is there to me, and then in this case the 3 points are taken to be as a kind of comma, and here we added the copula, but of course there could be other solutions. So for example, could be an exclamation. So we don't know actually, or also the pronoun can be different. And one can wonder if we need special tags for inscriptional punctuation. It could be maybe interesting to distinguish it from punctuation in literary text. I have another small example, and this is an inscription, short inscription with 2 sentences. So in the first one, if the interpretation of Laurent Dubois is correct, there are 2 guys, Ewopidas and the Eukes, and the inscription is saying that both has been sent on a military expedition. And this sentence is separated from another sentence, this one, where there is Lochagos Daitis, and here there is this guy, Daitis, which is mentioned as the chief of the expedition. And the 2 points are annotated here as a part of the first sentence. Yeah, so I think it is something one can discuss. This is an interesting argument of discussion, how punctuation in inscriptions should be annotated. And now I will go to the other main focus of today's presentation, which is the Corpus project. And this project will allow me to show how automatic and manual linguistic annotation can be combined, and how in a project you can annotate different levels of linguistic analysis, from lemmatization to semantics, and a little bit also of pragmatics. So Corpus is a project about the diachrony of modality in the history of the Latin language, ideally from the prehistory of the language up to the 7th century CE. And the main focus of the team is the linguistic annotation of modal passages in a diachronic corpus of literary and documentary texts. Now, I would like to spend just some 2 words about what is modality. So, modality is the expression of the notional domains of necessity, possibility, and volition, at least in our project. Then there are other projects which has a different perspective, but usually necessity and possibility are there. And so we analyze lexical markers such as possum, debeo, volo, forsitan, and morphological markers such as adjectival suffixes, so bilis, andus, turus. And we don't deal specifically with mood, which is a concept which is reserved in our theoretical framework for many things, among them sentence types, the opposition, realis, irrealis, and also for what is commonly called grammatical modes, so for example, indicative and subjunctive. So we start with an automatic annotation, and we use models which have been trained on tree bank data. And we use these to annotate parts of speech, lemmata, morphological features, and syntactic dependencies. If you hear one of the presentation of last session, you may have already hear part of what I'm going to say now, because I presented one way of reusing tree banks, and this is exactly what we are doing in the Corpus project. So the automatic annotation in our project is made possible thanks to a natural processing package, which is called Stanza. This package was developed by the Natural Language Processing Group of Stanford. And Stanza is used to convert a string containing human language text into lists of sentences and words to generate base forms of those words, their parts of speech and morphological features, and to give a syntactic structure dependency parts. It works at the moment for more than 60 languages, and it is compatible, this is very important, with universal dependencies that provides a universal standard of annotation across human languages. So this is the schema. So you start from raw non-annotated text, and then this text passes through processors that analyze it on different layers, and you can select the processors you need for your project. So, for example, we use the processors for tokenization and sentence split, lemmatization, parts of speech and morphological tagging, and for the dependency parsing. And then Stanza generates a new document that displays the given text, so the text you have given in input, and the automatic annotation according to which processor you selected. Processors work on the base on pre-trained models, and the model is the result of a machine learning process based on artificial neural networks. The model is trained on annotated data, such as tree banks. And the models for Instanza were trained on the universal dependencies tree banks. And for Latin, there are three Stanza models, ITTB, which is the default model, Perseus, and Proiel. And for Ancient Greek, you have two models, Proiel, which is the default model, and Perseus. And you can see, and if you follow this link, you can see all the available models for all languages. And you can also try this type of annotation, this automatic annotation yourself, as we have created we have set up a small notebook, and you can choose a text and you can try to annotate it according to the different models for Greek and for Latin. To sum up, this schema illustrates how we indirectly use tree banks. So at the top of the schema, you have the tree banks. Then as an intermediate step, you have the work of the Stanford NLP researchers who created the models and Stanza. And then you have our final use. And so we use Stanza to create automatically annotated text. And then our annotators correct part of the automatic annotation, and they manually annotate the modal passages. And now I would like to show you an example of archaic inscription annotated automatically. This is the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus. And second. Okay, so yeah, I've taken this part of a sentence. Utei ad praetorem urbanum Romam venirent, which means they are to come to Rome, to the praetor urbanus. And so in this text, there are many archaic forms. And so, for example, let's see what the machine does for utei, which is not recognized as a variant, an archaic variant of the lemma ut, but it is recognized as a noun, and it is given a lemma uteius, which I think it doesn't exist. And this form, as it is recognized as a noun, receives also morphological features. And of course, this is completely wrong, because the conjunction shouldn't have morphological features. And so this is a case where we need to correct. I will show you later, as we are going to do an exercise together, and so I can show you how you can correct a text automatically annotated and have the correct text. Let's see another word. This time it was better. So this is the word praetorem, an accusative. and so the morphological features were correctly recognized: accusative, masculine, singular, perfect. It was also recognized that it is a noun, and the only small problem is that the system has recognized a lemma praetor with the I, and we prefer to have a lemma praetor with the E, so that to have this form under the same lemma as the classical form. Then, once the modal passage has been corrected from the point of view of parts of speech and lemma and morphological analysis, we pass to the semantic annotation. So we annotate modality using guidelines which were specifically developed in the framework of our project. And so if you are interested, you can follow the link and read them. And in order to annotate, as I have already said, we use the Inscription platform. I'm going to show the platform to you in a moment. Now, let's see more specifically the types of modality. So until now, we have just said that modality is the expression of the notions of necessity, possibility, and volition. But what is, so when we encounter modality? So we encounter it when we speak of imagined situation. So let's take the case of epistemic modality, which is very easy to explain. In the case of epistemic modality, a state of affairs. So here, for example, in this sentence, the state of affairs, the postman bringing today's newspaper, is presented as something probable. So here the modal marker is probably. So that's probably the postman bringing today's newspaper. So epistemic modality is about likelihood, probability. Deontic modality is about obligation and permission. So, for example, when you have orders, you have deontic modality. But it can be also about the moral desirability of a state of affairs. So, for example, if you look at the example 2, this initiative of the federal government is highly deplorable. So, in this case, the state of affair is represented by the fact that the federal government has taken some initiative, and this is judged by the speaker as something highly deplorable. Another case which falls under deontic modality is volition and intention, and you see an example at point 3. So, for example, I want to hear the whole story. And then another type of modality is dynamic modality. So this can be about necessities, a possibility with reference to the inherent abilities or needs of someone. So, for example, sentence 1, he can stand on his head without using his hands. Or it can also be about external circumstances. So, for example, the garage is free, so you can park your car here. This is not about an ability, but more about a possibility enabled by the circumstances. And you can also have a generic possibility or necessity. So, for example, sentence 3, it can rain here every day in winter. And so we try to apply this schema to the case of the ancient languages, and in particular to the case of Latin. So let's try to see an example. So here you have always a sentence which is taken from the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus. So, de Bacchanalibus quae foederatei essent, ita ex deicendum censuere. In classical Latin, this would be de Bacchanalibus is qui federati essent, ita ex dicendum esse censuerunt. So I have added some elements which are not on the inscription. So here the modal meaning is conveyed by an adjectival suffix, ndus. We find it in ex dicendum. It was necessary to issue an edict. And we want to annotate it now according to our schema. So what we do is to isolate the modal marker. So here the suffix, and to annotate it. So in the first phase, we don't know if all markers we see are really modal or not. So this is why there is potential marker. But then, as it is annotated, it is that it is pertinent. But we specify it. So it is a marker which is pertinent, and it appears in a non-interrogative sentence, and there is no negation. So the sentence is also affirmative. And then we look for the scope of this modal marker. So what is the state of affair which is given as necessary? And in this case, this is represented by the base of the adjective. So this is this part. So edict, to issue an edict. And we consider that also the part, the previous part. So to those who are our allies, this is also part of the scope of the modal marker. So I hope that it is clear. It is necessary, and this concept is conveyed by ndus. And then there is what it is necessary, and this is quae foederate essent, ita ex dei ce. And so we annotate this as the scope of the modal marker. And once again, it is non-interrogative. There is no interrogative form here. And it is affirmative. There is no negation. And then we consider that there is a control. So someone who has to issue an edict must have control on this event, and it could develop along some time, and so we consider it dynamic. And then we annotate the modal relation between the marker and the scope. Grosso modo, the modal value of the sentence. So in this case, the modality is of the deontic type, because it is, so people are under the obligation of an authority, and they have to issue this edict. And so we annotate it as deontic, and this type is determined by the fact that there is an authority source, and this authority is gives something as an obligation, And the context is official, as we have to do with an edict. Now I would like to show you another example where we can also see the annotation of pragmatic aspects. It is always from these inscriptions, the Senatus Consultum, the Bacchanalibus. So the text has nequis eorum saccana, which is an error for bacchanal, abuisse velet. In classical Latin, this would be nequis eorum bacchanal. This is, sorry, this is a typo. Bacchanal abuisse vellet. So no one of them should have a sanctuary. Once again, so we go and look for the modal marker. In this case, it is a marker of volition, volo, and we annotated this as pertinent. It is non-interrogative, but this time it is negative because there is a nequis at the beginning, and so we consider that this is the marker is negative in this case. Then we look for the scope. So what people want or don't want, and in this case is saccanal abuisse, and we annotate it as we have already seen, so as non-interrogative, affirmative, and we try to describe the type of event which is at stake. And in this case, we have also a participant in the state of affairs. This is expressed here by the pronoun, which is an animate. And so we have an animate participant. And then once again, we analyze the relation between the scope and the marker. And in this case, maybe you expected that we annotate it as volition, as there is a volo, but actually this is not the value of the modal marker in this context. So, for example, you can look at the translation. There is no trace of this volo. Actually, volo is here used to express, once again, deontic authority, obligation in an official context. And it has here a pragmatic value. So the meaning of velet must be understood in this specific context. And so to say, it loses its volition value and has a meaning which is very close to that of classical deontic verbs, such as debe or oportet. And then in our annotation, we have also annotated the syntactic dependencies. This is part of the automatic annotation, and this is, I think, the aspect of the annotation which give the worst results. So on the whole, we are more or less happy with the automatic annotation. We have to correct sometimes parts of speech, lemmata, morphological features, but it is okay. But the syntactic dependencies, they are often wrong. So there you can see left, you can see how they appear in the Inception platform, and here you can see how the dependencies can be visualized, for example, through a viewer. So in this case, this is a ConLLU viewer, because our files are exported or can be exported as ConLU files. I will show this to you in a moment. And then let's move to the final part of my presentation, which is really experimental. And this is just a small part about some ideas of how to do corpus research with inscriptions. And basically, I would like to show that you can use inscriptions to do corpus linguistics as you use literary text. Maybe not really right now, there are still some problems, some issues, but I think in the near future this should be possible. I'm going to show you a tool which is called TXM and was developed in France. And it is ideal to work with big corpora, which can be automatically analyzed thanks to tree tagger. And this is what we have done for the Eagle corpus. So we have imported it in the TXM tool. And we have annotated it automatically, and it is not yet ready, because then we realized that there are still things to be fixed. But I think we are on the right way. And so when you have an annotated and linguistically annotated corpus, you can start to ask you research questions. So, for example, as I am interested in modality, one of my research questions would be, what are the most common co-occurrence of modal markers? Or there are their personal pronouns among these co-occurrence of impersonal modal markers, for example, opported. And is this co-occurrence meaningful from a statistical point of view? So, for example, this tool, TXM, allows you to have a specificity score for a co-occurrence. So the machine is telling you if the co-occurrence between two elements is due to chance or it is specifical. So it is not due to chance. So it can be interesting for a linguist to try to understand a little bit more why. So what is happening? So in this case, I'm going directly to show you. So this is a screenshot of TXM. And so here is a corpus of reference, and I've taken Cicero as a corpus, as a reference corpus, and I've looked for the lemma opporteo, because opportet is lemmatized as opporteo, so I had to look for opporteo and not opportet. And then I looked for co-occurrences on the on a left window of between -4 and -0. And here in the fourth column, you can see the specificity score. If this score is more than 3, the occurrence is specific, and so it is not due to chance. And so we just try to analyze it for a subcorpus of Eagle. So the database, epigraphic database Heidelberg, and compare it with Cicero to see if there are differences or it is more or less the same. And it seems that in both corpus, the co-occurrence of a personal pronoun, first, second person, with the portrait on the right or on the left. Anyway, it is not specific. While the co-occurrence with, for example, the pronoun is considered as specific. And now what should be done is to go through the examples and try to explain why this is specific and not the specific and not the co-occurrence with the personal pronouns of first and second person. So this is just an idea of how you can use corpora that have been already annotated, and hopefully one day also our Wapus corpus once it will be completed. So now I think that we have time for the exercise or for questions. So Monica and Gabi, you can tell me if you prefer to start with some questions or if you prefer to start with the exercise.
Okay, Francesca, thank you very much for this presentation. So there are many, many interesting things, complex things also, I have to say. But thank you for showing really different examples and the complexities. So I don't know if there are questions, if we have people in YouTube, in the chat. So please, if you have any questions, write your questions in the chat so we can answer now or later. So we still have about 35 minutes, so we still have time. If maybe, I don't know if, okay, so we have a first question in our chat from Anise from Brazil. Oh, I can of course show the question. So here is.
I can stop with my PowerPoint maybe. So
you can, okay.
I can't see.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can see it. Great. Oh, great. I'm happy to hear it. So just let's keep in touch. Please write to me, and
yes,
we can speak about modality. Yeah.
Yes, and Anisa Ferreira from Brazil is a colleague. She's a linguist. She's a classical philologist. So definitely there will be many things to discuss.
Great.
So thanks, Anisa, for your comment. Yes. And yes, of course, Anisa is also asking about Inscription. And one thing, so again, for our audience, Inscription is a web-based platform tool for annotations, originally developed for linguistic annotations, but can be used also for other annotations. For example, I'm using it a lot for name entity annotation and recognition and annotation. And again, in Sunoikisis, we also have a few sessions about Inscription. So if you don't know this tool, you can find, in any case, there is a lot of documentation online on the website, but there are also 2 sessions about annotations, including Inscription. Okay. So yes, Gabi, please.
Well, while we're waiting for the audience on YouTube to think of their questions and write them into the live chat feature, I have a very naive question, which is about punctuation. You talked, Francesca, about epigraphic punctuation and how to include that in the dependency tree bank and so forth. And I just sort of wanted to know a little bit more about that. I've always been uncomfortable even with tagging editorial punctuation in a tree bank because it's editorial, right? I mean, it helps with the syntactic understanding of the sentence, and we put a comma in an ancient Greek sentence if we assume that, the sentence requires a comma in the modern understanding of the comma and things like that. But And so it helps us to syntactically annotate it. But with ancient punctuation, I'm not sure that most, I mean, the epigraphic punctuation, you talk about the really archaic stuff, it's mostly not syntactic punctuation, is it? It's sometimes, you know, an interpunct is used for every word break, for example.
Yeah.
It's just like spacing. In other cases, it's used for stress within a word. In other cases, it's all sorts of. So I just wonder if we can disentangle any of that.
I think that we should have a general overview of cases. So probably there are cases where it is the word. So, for example, proclitic and clitics and the main word, and should we consider it? So it is on the stone or on the support. So I think it is part of the text. So you should consider it. Now, how it should be considered? Because so the guidelines for the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree banks have been thought for, yeah, you are right, for edited texts. And so the logics behind it may be a little bit different. So maybe we should just say that there is punctuation, and then maybe some expert of prosody and could say something more. I think it should be annotated, but maybe the actual tag set of the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree bank, it is not maybe ideal. So as what I've shown was just a kind of transposition. So you have the ancient punctuation, and then you try to transpose it in modern terms, and
I'm not sure that every non-alphabetic mark on an inscription is punctuation, is it? In the sense we normally understand the word.
I think that there could be also more decorative elements, right, which could also be in the inscriptions. So I think that, so for example, the inscriptions of Titabo is not particularly nice or decorative. So if this person tried to put these 3 dots, they have a meaning for him, I suppose. But I think it is really one of the issues which are most challenging. So, and we would need to reflect together in groups, I think, because so Giuseppe and me just started to think about it, both the both of us. But yes, of course, it would be nice to speak also with the
Are there traditional philological studies of punctuation? I mean, leaving aside the digital and the linguistic annotation, I mean, there must be a 19th century German thesis on punctuation, surely. I don't know.
But there are also, if I should check, but definitely there is something more recent, and I think that also Alessandro Vatri, who is going to present in a few weeks, wrote something about that, it was more about readings. So the fact that when human beings began to read alone a text, of course, they needed punctuation. So I have to check, and of course I can add this bibliographic reference, but I'm sure that Alessandro, so sorry for interrupting, but I know that you wrote something about that, and definitely we have other bibliographies about punctuation. And sorry also for our audience, this is a very interesting question, not only a specific question. Punctuation is always a problem, and here today we are discussing about inscriptions. In inscriptions we have these marks, probably it was a punctuation or not. Then in many other sessions in Sunoikisis we talk about critical editions of literary text, where we have 2 layers, not only the ancient text, usually without a punctuation originally, but then the modern edition, where we have punctuation put by modern scholars, and we can have different editions of the same text with a different punctuation. Sorry for this, but this is for our audience. And here the discussion, and this is a very interesting discussion because this is a discussion about ambiguities in our ancient texts, and the fact that today, especially with digital technologies, we're using tools, standards, guidelines originally developed for modern and contemporary languages, and we're using these guidelines for historical text, where we have other problems. And we are not, and as Gabby and Francesca were discussing now, we have a problem of interpretation. But on the other side, I think the fascinating aspect is that in many situations we have these ambiguities. The short inscription for Titabo, well, we don't know exactly. So, and that's the problem. So we have just two words on the text, and then these three dots. And when we have to annotate this is where we have the problem, because we have to put something. So we need the verb, basically the predicate, because this is the dependency tree bank. We need to represent the dependency, but this is the ambiguity. And so also for a very short text like this nice inscription, we can have different tree banks. Am I correct, Francesca? So, and I think this is a frustrating aspect, but also a fascinating aspect of historical text, ambiguities. And how can we represent ambiguity? Okay.
Yeah, and I think what it should still be done is specific guidelines for inscriptions, because maybe just, as I said, just to have a specific tag for epigraphic punctuation, it would solve at least part of the problem, that of the annotation. Then the interpretation is still there, of course, because you don't know how to interpret it, but at least you know how to annotate it. It's already something.
Exactly, and this is the reason why we are here today, and why Francesca started her project. And also in Leipzig, we started the discussion a few years ago, because we need guidelines for epigraphy. And so, exactly. So, and then there are many other problems, and exactly, Anisa in the chat say filling in the blanks. Exactly, of course, because many inscriptions are fragmentary, so we have many gaps. And so how can we represent those gaps? And again, we can use different interpretations, different editions, so we can have parallel annotations. There are cases where we are quite sure about the inserted text, but there are many other cases, as we know, where we need different reconstructions of these inscriptions. But it's, yes, this is the challenging but also fascinating part of epigraphy, where we can discover every day different messages in our text. And the description of Titabo I think is a nice example. Also because it's a private message also.
Oh, yes.
This is the nice thing about not public inscriptions, but private, or private inscriptions were. Okay, so I don't know if, well, we still have maybe a few minutes. I have a question about the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus. You showed the automatic lemmatization, and in one of your slides you said that, okay, of course we can get mistakes. This is what happens. But I have a question about one of the lemmata, because you said, okay, this lemma doesn't exist. So in this case, so the system can create not existing lemmata. So the mistake is not in giving you the wrong lemma, because okay, now I see your
this was Uteus.
Yes, exactly, Uteus. So so in this case we have a new lemma, a wrong lemma. This is an interesting thing.
It can happen.
Okay,
it can happen. Yeah. So I haven't checked, but I don't think that it exists. So.
No, exactly. So this is where we have. So just to understand the work that we have to do when we try to automatize this process, okay? Because we can get the wrong lemma in the sense that the system gives you a correct lemma, but in this case it's not the lemma, or a completely wrong lemma. So just to show the variety of results that we get, okay? This is again for discussing the complexities, especially when working with a text like this, with archaic forms.
I think
not classical Latin.
Yeah, I think it takes probably the final part as the final part of a noun, so it is analyzed as a noun, and then it has to find
exactly
lemma.
Exactly.
And now it would be interesting to see the morphological analysis to see how it was analyzed, but I didn't take the. Maybe we can look at it in the exercise to see how it was analyzed.
Yes, yes, exactly. This is just to show an example of how the machine works and things. And so when we deal with the results, and we have to correct these results, so to consider the kind of mistakes that we get. Okay, but maybe now we can go to the exercise to see, which is yeah.
Okay, so if you go to the Sunoikisis page, I think that Sunoikisis, this session, you will find so here there is a repository where you will find a TXT file, an XML file, and a zip file. And now you need to do this exercise in Inception, you need the zip file. So tell me if it is okay if I don't show you how to download it. So I hope that you can.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
yes.
okay. Then when you are ready, you can go to the Inception demo, which is here. And then you just put demo and demo as username and as password, and you sign in. Okay. And then you have to import the project. So if you have downloaded the zip file, you have just to go and take the zip file. So now it is called copy of WAPOS project. And then you open it and you import it, and exactly. And then, so tell me if there are problems. You go to annotation, and you are so you see the documents, which is a Latin inscription from the epigraphic database Rome. And then you have then here you have the inscription. Oh, I thought it was the Senatus Consultum, but actually is another inscription that I have chosen for the exercise. But I can see the morphological analysis of UTI later. So now the idea would be that you read this inscription and you look for the lexical markers. And if you are a little bit disturbed because there are these lines, which are the dependency, the syntactic dependencies, you can go here, general display preferences and annotation layer preferences. So here you can also have a list of our layer of annotation as the platform was customized in Inception. And you can just do this, and then these dependencies will disappear. So I think it is more legible now. And so basically, the inscription, or the writer is addressing the passerby, so Viator, and telling him to stand and to read. So Viator resiste et robot et lege. And then he is saying that he was away from his city, his Pellum, in Umbria for 27 years, and now he is back in his homeland. And then he says, "Scio meo portere, colere unc locum, ubi ossa meorum requiescunt, et mea et amicorum meorum." So he's saying, I know that, and we have to see how to interpret this oportere. So I know that it is suitable, or it is my duty. So I know that I must take care of this place. So it is a sepulchral space that he has, no, that one of his families has bought. And so this place where my family, so where my family is buried, and me, and also some of my friends. So yeah, so it is a place where so it is a sepulchral space which has been defiled. And so now he's speaking about this place and about the fact that he has to take care of this place in name of his family and of the people who are buried or will be buried there. And so now the question is how to interpret oportere. So let's start with the check of the automatic analysis. So you see that here is the lemma and it is wrong, but you can correct it very easily. So you go here, so you see you are in the layer lemma, and you just correct it. It is not oporter, but oportet, and so you correct it. Then it is an infinitive, and let's go and check whether the morphological features are correct. So it is present, yeah, it's true. It is an infinitive, and voice is active. Okay, it's perfect. In this case, you have nothing to correct, and it is a verb. So you can now analyze it also from the point of view of modality. And so now I'm not going to do it for all elements, but you see, you have just to check if the lemma is correct, if the morphological features are correct. So here you have indicative, singular, the person is first person, yeah, it's good. It is a finite form, and it is active. So it's perfect. So it is well annotated, and it is a verb. And so, and you go on. And now the question is, oh yes, and you see, so you have different layers. So the lemma, the morphological features, and the part of speech. And if something is wrong, you can just delete it and rewrite it, or you can just correct it. And theoretically, you can add the layer. No, you can't here. But example, if you want to add the layer, for example, because this is not punctuation, this is something else. No, this is not. Okay, so maybe there are small differences between this demo platform and our platform.
But I think that you can't add, in the same layer, you can't add another annotation. So this is usually the message that I get in Inception, but I don't know if this is because technically you have one annotation per layer. I think, I don't know. But,
now I wanted just to show that you can, well, basically I'm going to delete this. And okay, now you don't have the should be part of speech. and you can just underline.
Exactly.
Oh no, this is too much. Okay, and then you go on part of speech, and then here you can choose punctuation. And here you have the tag set for the part of speech. Yeah,
Yes,
and then this
yeah.
punctuation. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Monica.
No,
Okay.
no problem. Of course, also, again, for our audience, if this is the first
Yeah,
time
yeah,
you
yeah.
see Inception, okay, in this screenshot, no, this is not a screenshot, this is really Inception
Yeah.
live, and you can see these different colors are different layers, okay, used in general in linguistic annotation, and on the right in Inception, you can see for each layer, and under the layer you see the lemma, the text, or other parts. In any case, Inception has a documentation in general, so you have in this case instructions, you have this video, Francesca is explaining how to use it, and you can experiment with inscriptions, but in general Inception has guidelines for users, for administrators, so really you can work with it. If this is the first, yeah, please.
In the PowerPoint, there are references to all the projects that I
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. All, yeah. And so now let's see how to interpret opportere. So you have to choose the layer modal unit, and with modal unit you can annotate both the marker and the scope. And so you choose opportere, and it is the marker. So I annotate it as the marker, and it is pertinent. And the sentence, it is non-interrogative, and it is affirmative. There is no negation. And then I have to find the scope, and the scope is if you interpret it as an accusativus cum infinitivo, me colere unc locum, and then there is the relative. So usually we take in the scope also the relative sentence. So this would mean that the scope is all this part that I choose, and I annotate it as the scope, and it is non-interrogative once again, and it is affirmative. And so this person has to take care. So there is the idea of control. I don't think that it is something dynamic. It is more something which continues. So I would say that it is not dynamic, but the attribution of dynamic, not dynamic, and control and not control is sometimes a little bit controversial, also in our project. So and then actually I have to complete the scope with me. And so I have to create another layer, which is the layer scope. And I have to do it. No, sorry. And then I have to repeat this here, because I cannot connect in Inception a layer scope with a layer scope unit. So this is actually, I cannot connect a layer scope with the layer modal unit. So I can connect a scope with the same layer. So I can connect a scope with a scope. And so in this way, I have the analysis of the scope, but I have also added the part which was before opportere, and so I have all my scope in the annotation. And now I have to analyze the modal relation, and I just connect the marker with the scope, and now I have a new layer of annotation, which is the modal relation, and it is opportere, and it comprises the colere to meorum, and of course it is not comprised. It is not included because we have to add it with this supplementary scope, so to say. And now we have to decide the type of modality, and I think that we can all agree that it is deontic, because it's something someone feel the duty to do. Then for the deontic subtype, I think that people can start to have doubt. For example, I would interpret it as a kind of acceptability. So I know that it is fundamental, it is very important that I take care of this place. And so I would annotate it as acceptability. But maybe someone else would rather say that there is maybe a kind of authority. Maybe it is the self itself who has some authority. When I say so, I must do this, and I am myself. I am a kind of authority on myself. But I would annotate it as acceptability. And in this case, I can indicate the degree of acceptability. So it is not just desirable or suitable. It is something absolutely necessary. And so I have completed my annotation. And so we usually compare the annotations of the annotators. So maybe someone else has annotated it differently. And in our project, you can also give two interpretations. So maybe you want to use the other option, and to say that there is here another type of deontic modality, which is authority. And then you have to say which type of authority. So you have a kind of maybe this person is saying that he has a legal obligation of taking care, and so in this case, if it is a legal obligation, this should be, but in any case, it is private, so it is not official, and the type of source in this case it could remain unspecified, could be maybe the law. So, of course, it depends how you interpret the text. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for this example, and also for our students, our audience. Maybe you are a bit confused now. No, Francesca, thank you. It was very, very clear. Of course, this example is perfect to see the complexity of a text, in this case, inscription, historical text. And in this case, Inception allows really to annotate many different layers. And thank you for this example also, because Inception provides users with built-in layers and tag sets. But the good thing is that you can produce custom layers, custom tag set, like in this example, specifically for inscriptions and for modality. And in fact, you see how many annotations you can add, and this is interesting. And again, it's a question of interpretation, ambiguities, so we can have different annotations, but also within Inception it's possible to have different annotators annotating the same text, and then we can compare different annotations. So there is an inter-annotator agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will speak about that another time, because of course it can be quite complex. But anyway, so really thank you for this example, because this is great to see how Inception works, but also in general how many different interpretations we can have for one text, in this case for an inscription. one thing, so there is a note about we just have 2 minutes, but Anise, so with Inception we have to create the annotation categories and subcategories under layers, not under tag set. I think this is about features. So in Inception we have layers, features, and the tag set, if I remember correctly. And yes, not under tag set, because we can have a tag set both for the layer and for feature. Then they depends on your project, on what you want to represent. So, and yes, it's quite flexible Inception in this sense. And also, Francesca, please.
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
It is very flexible. Yeah.
Okay, and there is also a mailing list, just to mention that in any case that you can join and ask questions to the community. And I know the developers, and they are very interested in projects dealing with historical documents, and so they want to involve our community, and so they are happy if you join the mailing list and you ask questions about the use of Inception. Okay. Okay, so now it's 6:45, so our time is over. I know that Francesca has many other things to say about epigraphy, and really she's doing a great job. Yes, Francesca, please.
Just before we leave, I just wanted, can I show my acknowledgement slide?
Of course.
Okay, this is for, I would like to thank these 3 institutions supporting the project, and then let me thank you, my team, in particular Elena Bermudez-Sabelle and Paola Maronjo. And if you have a question about the customization of Inception, ask Elena, because she's the person who customized Inception, so she can answer any of your questions, I'm sure. And then there are our students who are also annotating in the project. So thank you to all.
Okay, Thank you, Francesca. Thank you. This is very important. First of all, of course, to mention the supporting institutions, which is good. So to have this project, has funds. So Francesca is working on this project, and of course there are many people behind the project. And in GitHub you can see really what they are doing, but also on your website you can see, of course, the names of these people contributing to the project and working a lot behind the scene because a project like this requires a lot of expertise, of course. Is a complex project, and I can say that I'm very happy to see where you are, because I remember when we started this conversation a few years ago, I think in Lausanne at the Digital Humanities Conference. And I remember, and so I'm very happy to see that we are here. So there is still a lot to do, but this is already a lot, I have to say, for epigraphy. So really, I'm very happy. So, but now, unfortunately, our time is over. So, thank you, Francesca, for this wonderful presentation of linguistic annotation for inscriptions. So, this concludes our, let's say, a sub-part of this term about epigraphy. But we will have other sessions about linguistic annotation. Not next week, because next week we don't have a session. It's holiday in Germany, and this semester is mainly based in Germany. But we will have 2 other sessions on May 20 and May 27 about learning and reading ancient Greek with different tools, and we will see how to use linguistic annotations and different reading environments for learning and reading ancient Greek. But of course, we will see mainly literary text, but of course you can also use inscriptions for reading and, well, learning ancient Greek, but still, yes, of course, also for learning ancient Greek. There are many complexities in inscriptions, so they are definitely not easy, but there are short texts that you can read for learning ancient Greek, but especially for learning the different dialects and different forms of the Greek alphabet. And this is really super interesting. So again, now we really have to finish our session, but again, you have the session outline, the exercise with this the description, and then we are going to add the slides.
Oh, yes.
And yes, thank you, Francesca, and also you also have the readings. Okay, so thank you all. Also thank you to our audience on YouTube for your questions, for your comments, and please every week join us and write your questions, comments, doubts in the chat. Okay, so thank you and have a good night for those of you in our time zone, of course. Otherwise, have a good day and see you next week. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Speak soon.